Vexillology is the study of flags, which lets you know about the country's history as well as just the evolution of its flag, which can be mildly chaotic, and especially in today's case, Guatemala. Now, I had no interest in this topic, and I actually frequently talk to my friends about video topics they'd like to see, and for some reason this was one of them. And it was because of this guy that was on Instagram Reels or YouTube or whatever, and he was able to identify a world map based purely off of the flags, what they looked like, their emblems, whatever it may be. He was just able to identify based off of national flags, which I think is incredible. And frankly, I don't care about my friend's opinion anymore. I care more about the fact that I'm going to be like that guy at the end of the series.
In August of 1962. Kenya, however, is not yet independent, which means this map must take place before December of 1963.
But I'm going to start with Guatemala because this is where she's from, and, she didn't know what flag to do otherwise, and America's flag is boring, I'm not going to lie to you. I don't like our flag. I think there are so many more interesting flags out there, and Guatemala happens to have one of the most chaotic flag histories I've ever seen in my life. With America, we just started with, firstly we have a super racist Confederate flag, but that's not America, that's, the Confederacy. But we started out with a 13 stars, and then we just went up to the 50 stars, or changed the stars as needed. There's nothing particularly interesting. Now, Spain ruled in Central America until about 1821. And then after that, essentially what is Mexico today ran all of Central America. And then soon, the Federal Republic of Central America was formed, also known as the United Provinces of Central America. And they were formed from about 1823 to 1841 or so. And they broke up because of a civil war, but their original flag looked like this. And it was horizontal blue stripes with a white stripe in the middle. The white stripe represented purity and peace, and the blue stripes were two oceans. Now, it can be assumed that these two oceans were the Pacific and the Atlantic because, Central America is surrounded by these two oceans, but the thing that's confusing to me is I don't remember them being on top or on the bottom of, Central America, but I guess they can do whatever they want. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the emblem, other than the 5 mountains which represented the 5 countries that were a part of this. It was Nicaragua, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Honduras, and Guatemala. These were the 5 countries that made up the 5 mountains. And now, Guatemala is going to break away from them. They're going to break away from them about 1840. And this is really because liberals and conservatives on, both sides in all the states were like, guys, I really, really hate you. And so civil war broke out. Now, it's not like American Civil War. I don't know if there was actual fighting, but it may have been more civil than America's Civil War, where they just said, I hate you, let's break up, like a very healthy relationship. Or toxic, I can't really tell. But anyway, they break up, and then they form their first flag, which is essentially the exact same thing they had before, just without the emblem. Now, this was a big step. Removing the emblem essentially removed them from the Federal Republic or the United Provinces, and it essentially made it its own country. Now, it's not to be acknowledged as a country by the ones surrounding it or as Spain for a little bit, but for right now, Guatemala itself is attempting to be sovereign. In 1843, we'll see the first time that their flag essentially has a change, which is their own emblem. Now, the emblem has mountains because it is a very mountainous area. In Guatemala, there are apparently lots of mountains. Never been there myself, though. And then there's also arrows, which I don't understand the significance. Perhaps it means self-defense. Perhaps that was the weapons they used. I don't know. It'd be really funny if they beat the Spanish, but I believe the Spanish actually just pulled out of Central America, which is also pretty silly in of itself. Unlike Europe, or England, which kept itself in America as long as it could until it was literally forced out. We should have lost. Then they make their flag uglier. They add yellow and red boxes onto the left side of their flag, and frankly, I think it looks horrible. The emblem I don't think really had a significant change, and if it did, I myself didn't notice it. And this flag was changed in 1851, for any of you who care about dates. But then 1858 is when the flag gets significantly more disgusting. Inspired by the Spanish flag, they put a giant yellow line in the middle, and then they put blue, white, and red on the outside, and it looks horrific. It is disgusting. Like, when I look at this flag, it's like, bleh. You know, oof. I hate it, and I just think the colors don't really work together. It's not something I would attach to my truck, but the American flag looks pretty cool. So I think it's disgusting. But it was in 1858, and Spain actually acknowledged their independence in 1864. So I guess the sucking up did something really good, and thankfully, they changed their flag as soon as possible. And then they changed their flag to the one, well, essentially the one we see today. There was sort of an intermediate where it was like the logo was much bigger and much fancier, and I'll put it on screen. I'm also not a big fan of this one. I think the emblem is way too big. It's way too flaunty. So I really like that they sized it down. And then this flag, I think, is beautiful. This flag is beautiful for essentially everything in it. So if you look at the flags of Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, you'll see that they all have horizontal blue and white stripes. Costa Rica's a little bit different. I don't know what they did with their flag. Perhaps they'll get their own video. But their flag is also kind of gross. Well, actually, it's a little bit better than Guatemala's flag last time, but I think it's kind of gross. I still don't really like it. But Costa Rica is really the standout here, but it's essentially the same as the other three members in the Federal Republic. Guatemala just said, we're going to turn it horizontal, or vertical, so that we can contrast their horizontal lines. And then their emblem, I really like their emblem. So they have a quetzal, which is their national bird, and it means liberty. And it's sitting on top of the date inside of a scroll that Central America got its independence from Spain, which is September 15th, 1821. And then there's a few things that many people actually don't notice, but I'm going to start with the stuff that people tend to notice. The bay laurel, which is that little leafy crown on the outside that people wore in Roman times or whatever, that's something that will obviously catch your eye, and that stands for victory. Now, what are they victorious of? Breaking away from Spain? Maybe. I don't know. Then you see the two swords that are clashing against each other, and this essentially represents honor. There's really not too much to say about it. It just represents honor. And so then, something I actually didn't notice until I stared really, really hard and was researching, is that there are two guns, two Remington rifles is what they are, that are also crossing each other. And this represents Guatemala's willingness to defend itself if something tries to invade its land or take its land again, or do what Spain did, inhabit it, or do what America's probably going to do and steal some oil, you know? One way or the other, they're saying we will defend ourselves. Now, they do have flags for ethnic tribes or for the natives in their area, and I would like to make this a separate video where I talk about the native tribes in all of Central America, or all of South America, or all of North America. I'd like to make that its own separate video. I don't want to talk about, like, the people that literally stole the land from the natives while talking about the natives at the same time. I don't think that's fair. I think they deserve their own video, so that's what I'm going to do about that one. But, you know, finally, the Pacific and the Atlantic are on the outsides, the left and the right, of what would actually be true to Guatemala. Not gonna lie to you, other than the outrageously disgusting flags that we've seen from time to time, it's really not that fascinating, vexillology itself. But the history of vexillology, the history of the country, can be really interesting. And that's what I think. I like looking at this and seeing how interesting it can get. Now, they've had two flags that I think were honestly disgraceful. It's not something I'd ever hang on my 50-foot pole, but hey, you do you, man. But if you have a specific flag you'd like to hear about, or if this video sucked, please tell me.